Today on Conversations Aloud, we're discussing the complex and often painful relationship between colonial powers and the indigenous people they impact, particularly in Australia. We're joined by Paul Rushworth Brown, who is an author who weaves culture, historical fiction, and rich storytelling. He recently released his fourth fiction book called Outback Odyssey, which explores love, brutality, survival, and identity in the shadow of colonization. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you, Paul. Let's start off with if you can give an overview of the book.
Okay, so it's actually dual layered. Okay, so if you first on the top, it's sort of like a gripping historical 1950s Australian story of survival and identity and reckoning. On the surface, it sort of like follows a young Yorkshire migrant who comes over to Australia as a 10-pound pom back in the...
What's a 10-pound pom? What is it?
A 10-pound pom?
Yeah.
Okay, so a 10-pound pom was back in the 50s, Australia wanted to keep Australia British. So what they did was they said, okay, any Brits like Irish or Scottish or English, if you want to come to Australia and live your life here, it'll cost you £10. We'll pay for the trip over. We'll find you a job. We'll find you somewhere to live. The only thing is you have to stay for 2 years and work either in a factory or on a station, which is like a huge farm. You know, sometimes our stations are like the size of England.
Oh wow!
And
they did that. And they did that to keep, you said, Australia Australian, as opposed to what?
They didn't want islanders and I suppose Asians coming into the country. Right now, this is going back to, thank God, this has changed quite a lot since the 1950s.
Yeah.
But they wanted Australia to stay British, to stay English.
Yeah.
Right. And I know it sounds it sounds as bad as apartheid, but that's sort of like the history of Australia, and thank God as a species we've improved a little bit.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
And then, so he arrives in Melbourne, and he goes through all the rigmarole of going to the hostel and having the test done, and they actually had a test where the immigration officer would actually dictate to them to write sort of like a paragraph down on paper. And if they couldn't do that, then they wouldn't be allowed into the country. That's how sort of like
so you have to be able to write.
Yeah.
You
have to be able to speak English. And but beneath all that, I know it sounds terrible at the moment, but I mean the book is actually a celebration of we don't really use the word Indigenous in Australia anymore. We use the term First Nations, and beneath all that, it's he's sent out to the outback, and he's put on a farm, 1,000-acre farm, sheep farm, and that's like second layer is a powerful allegory about the silences in the First Nations history. And it doesn't it's about the land, and our First Nations people are very, very connected to the land, and which is something sort of like that quite often non-First Nations people forget.
Yeah.
And so it's dual layered, and if you can read it just as an adventure, romance, historical fiction novel, and treasure hunt, because it's tied quite. One of the subplots is a treasure hunt for Weiberg's gold, which is a true story, and there's still people in Victoria looking for this treasure. But that's sort of like underlying allegorical aspects of the novel celebrate First Nations culture, and the idea is to get people to think, especially Australians, to think about the wisdom. I mean, First Nations people have been living in this country for 60,000 years.
It's insane,
right? And they know far more than we do about the country, about belonging, and about that type of thing. And it's a rich tapestry of culture. And so that the story actually brings that out. And in certain aspects, it sort of like gets people to think about the decisions that they've made with regard to the referendum that we had, and that type of thing. In other words, giving First Nations people a voice.
Yeah, because usually the story is written by the people that colonize, as opposed to the other group. So you don't hear much of the other side story,
No.
but it's good to kind of hear the other perspective, because we understand the world based on our reality is based on the information that's provided to us, but that's filtered through many layers to
of course,
showcase a particular story.
Yeah.
But there's another story too. There's always another story, at least another one. And so it's I think, it's very important to showcase that, right?
Yeah. And in this novel, First Nations people aren't sort of like stuck in the margin. They're actually sort of like a major. They're actually the protagonists in the novel.
Interesting. So your book blends, history and fiction. What research does that entail to do before writing, to make sure that First Nation experience is showcased accurately?
Yeah. Look, in Australia, the first thing that people who are interviewing ask me, the first thing they do is, what is a white fella writing historical fiction about First Nations culture? And I don't preach, and I don't try to talk for Aboriginal people. What I do is I try to echo some of their sentiments and some of their feelings about how they've been treated in the past, and how quite often they're still treated today.
And how do you get that experience? How do you?
Oh, sorry. So, I spent a good years like traveling through the outback, hitchhiking, living rough at the side of the road.
And for those that don't know what the outback is, what is that?
Okay, so as most people would know, Australia is a huge country, a huge continent, and most people in the country sort of like live down the eastern side of it. But between those few thousand miles on the east coast and the west coast of Australia, there's I don't know the exact number, but there's hundreds of thousands of miles of sheep stations and desert. Well, it's a Simpson Desert. It's a desert. And the First Nations people have been living in that environment, as I've said, for 60,000 years. And as non-First Nations people, I've sort of like traveled all the way through there. But I remember one particular time, and I was hitchhiking, and there's a place called Three Ways, which is sort of like right in the center of Australia, and you can go from sort of like the coast, Townsville, all the way into Three Ways, and a road goes north to Darwin, and another road goes south to Adelaide. And I waited there for 3 days for a lift.
Oh, okay, correct.
And I've spent time in Arnamland, right? So, and plus, Aboriginality is actually part of the curriculum it's in the syllabus in Australian high schools. So we have to teach it.
Yeah.
And that all of those I suppose insights, plus the fact that the first part of the novel is actually loosely based on my father's journey over here in the 50s as a 10-pound pom.
Okay, interesting. That's very interesting.
And he used to tell me stories about, Aboriginal stockmen reputed to be the best in the world. And he worked with me. He worked on a 1,000-acre sheep station with Aboriginal stockmen. So some of the stories that he used to tell me, like for instance, when they just to give you an example, I remember him telling me about they used to muster the sheep, and put them in a pen, and any of the lambs that had been born in that time, they'd obviously have to stop the fly strike. They'd have to sort of like cut off the tail, right? Give them an injection, and then basically what they used to do is they actually used to sort of like grab the testicles with their teeth and rip them out.
Oh wow. Okay.
Just things like that.
Serious stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. What is the current relationship between the First Nation communities and the broader Australian population? But just before that, I was just looking. The east-west distance across Australia is 2,500 miles.
Yeah, right.
Which is huge. But yeah, so what is the current relationship today, and how does that compare to maybe the 60s or 50s?
I think that things are difficult. I mean, and it's a different world. I mean, you've got sort of like remote settlements of First Nations people, and then you've got certain suburbs of Sydney that are obviously urban, where First Nations people live. And there's quite the relationship between First Nations people. It depends on where. I mean, and that's really, the more I think about it, it's a difficult question to answer, because I mean, I can start off by saying in 2023 there was a referendum and it was called the Yes vote, and that vote was to give First Nations people a voice in Parliament, keeping in mind that First Nations people only got the ability to vote back in the 70s. All right.
Yeah.
So, and the answer was no. So the yes vote was knocked back, and there's a lot of groups, reconciliation groups, that are still fighting for some sort of reconciliation between First Nations people and non-Indigenous people.
So sorry, when you say to be represented in Parliament, are they not represented right now?
Look, there's a couple of senators in the First Nations senators in Parliament, but they wanted look, they didn't want to change laws or anything like that. And what they really asked for was that they didn't want to change the constitution. And there was only sort of like 2 or 3 things that they requested, and that was just to have, I suppose, more of a say in how they're in the decisions being made about them. Now, at the present time, there's a huge disparity in health between non-Indigenous people and First Nations people. I think it's something like 10 years.
Yeah. No, it's crazy.
Yeah. And so they wanted more of a say. Anyway, it was knocked back. And I think one of the reasons why it was knocked back is that people are scared, right? They're scared, and quite often they don't understand.
What are they scared of?
I think they're scared. I mean, being afraid of something, quite often it's because you don't have the correct knowledge about something, right? And quite often the media is sensationalized, and they hear about First Nations people sort of like out in the Central Australia being drunk and causing trouble and all that type of thing. So I think that goes into it. But also, like, there's this whole issue of sort of like the stolen generations, where First Nations people back in sort of like the 1800s were sort of like taken away from their family, taken away from their country, and stuck in orphanages and missions, and not allowed to use their language, not allowed to use their First Nations names, taken away from their family and taught to be white, basically. And that's had a huge impact on, I suppose, their culture, because, I suppose from an outsider's point of view, when you think about First Nations people, you think about sort of like one nation, but in Australia, it's not. Australia was made up of 1,000 different countries, First Nation or Aboriginal countries.
Like
each with their
every
own.
clan had a different kind of country.
Correct. And language and, initiation rites and, the way they dealt with certain things. And if say a member of one country or one mob, we call Aboriginal clans a mob,
Okay.
right? And if a member of one mob had wanted to travel through the area of another mob, he would have to basically ask for permission,
Mm.
right? And quite often that meant sort of like sitting on the boundary of the land and waiting for somebody from that mob to come over and give them permission to cross it.
Wow. Okay. Very interesting. Obviously that it's trauma, right? They experienced a lot of trauma,
Yeah,
and it's generational trauma. And it seems like when you look at the health numbers, when you look at the drinking problem, that was all, I think, post colonization as a
yeah,
result of
yeah.
those things.
Yeah.
Um, how does how is the healing going on at the moment of that trauma? Is there? I'm assuming there's a lot of partnerships and organizations kind of uh, bringing different people together to understand each other's culture. There's a regeneration of the First Nation culture. Is that happening? I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, look, as a nation and as a people, we're trying. We're trying. I mean, and there's a long way to go. Yeah. To give you an example, on Anzac Day down in Melbourne, we do this thing called Welcome to Country, which is sort of like basically a First Nations way of welcoming people. In the old days, it was sort of like welcoming people into their country. But these days, we usually, if there's a celebration or a important day, they'll have an elder from that particular country where it's being held do a welcome to country. And certain people in Melbourne actually heckled the welcome to country, which was such bad form.
Mm.
And I suppose, so like one of the underlying parts of the novel is that it doesn't preach, it tells a story, but what it does is it does it in such a way that it gets people to think about certain aspects of how First Nations people were treated, the wisdom and the cultural tapestry that they have, and why we should embrace that as part of the part of the Australian culture.
Yeah. Would you say that the First Nation culture is part of the wider Australian culture? It's very, I guess, for nations where there's been a lot of immigration, to define a culture is difficult, right? And
It
we're
is.
we're having this debate in the UK now,
Yeah.
funny enough, because there's a lot of immigration happening, and kind of what does it mean to be British? Multiculturalism. Is there a core culture that people need to adhere to? Is that the same thing happening in Australia where,
Oh, definitely.
yeah, oh, okay.
Definitely. I mean, as a high school teacher, probably about 60% of the students in the high school where I teach are Asian.
Hmm.
So, but saying that, they try to embrace, obviously we teach Aboriginality, and they try to embrace, what we teach them. But, for somebody that's just arrived and spent time in learning English in an English language school before coming to high school, that's sort of like asking too much sometimes.
Yeah, it's challenging, and at the same time, as the saying goes, it takes two to tango. There has to be the energy and the intention from the people coming in, but also the energy and intention from the people receiving those people to kind of create an environment that allows that the building of the culture and the relationship and the trust. But the problem is, it's if you don't have anything defined as what the culture is, it becomes difficult to
Yeah.
assimilate
Yeah.
to something that's
Yeah.
not clear with boundaries.
Yeah. And it's sort of like, I mean, in Australia, we're very, very accepting of multiculturalism, right? And in most cases, very, very accepting of sort of like First Nations. We teach it. We promote Aboriginal culture in classes. We talk about links between Australia and Asia and all that type of thing. And it's a melting pot, right? And I suppose for First Nations people, and I can't talk for them. I cannot talk for them. All I try to do is, I suppose, resonate some of the sentiments that I've researched and what I've seen, as I've worked and lived out in the outback. Because I worked for Queensland Railways. This is obviously way before I was an educator, but I worked for Queensland Railways as a navvy. So a navvy is basically a worker that rips up track in the middle of the outback, like rail track in the middle of the outback, and replace it. And tough job.
Yeah. So, but you must have encountered a lot of the First Nations people doing that.
Yeah.
Do you see any parallels between kind of Australia's colonial past and what's happening in other countries today in terms of land, identity, power?
I mean, really, when you think about it, I mean, any country that was colonized by the British has gone through, or is going through a similar situation. And obviously there was with apartheid and that was sort of like I suppose another step. I was going to say above, but no, I think it was another step below what we're dealing with in Australia. But I mean, a lot of the interviews I've had have been with sort of like American hosts, and they spoke. They've said it's exactly the same thing that's happening, with our native peoples, in Canada or in the US.
Yeah.
So, but deep down, one of the reasons why I wrote the novel in the way that I did was that as a species, we've got to get better. We've got to get better. And, I'm not even going to go into some of the things that are happening around the world at the moment that are diabolical. But I still have faith that we can get better.
Yeah. I mean, if you could, well, what do you hope readers take away from your book, especially the non-First Nation readers, who I'm assuming this is for?
Well, it's I've actually First Nations people will read it as well.
Okay.
But obviously there's a real literacy issue over here with First Nations people, and they say, well, why should we learn English? You don't learn how to speak Aboriginal, right? So there's that type of thing. But for non-Indigenous people, I want them to read between the lines, appreciate the wisdom and cultural tapestry, and the science and the learning that we can get from First Nations people, and not to dismiss it.
Yeah, I think it's a big issue. Yeah, even today, with the way we see countries and their culture in a very negative way, because we see our culture as maybe more technologically advanced, but there's a lot of history, there's a lot of tradition, there's a kind of a way of being with the land that I think for a lot of people is difficult to understand, because for most people, they've been moving around, through generation, but obviously, First Nations, or even like farmers, generation over generation, especially farmers, that get everything from the land, have a different kind of relationship with that. But what I'm surprised to this day is we see this kind of attack on different cultures even today. And I remember seeing this with kind of Iran-Israel war, where they were kind of preparing people for the war with Iran, and Iran obviously has a lot of issues and challenges like many other countries, but they were kind of putting it as a lesser of people, and that's why we need to go in, and it's kind of dehumanizing in order to justify the actions that they will be taking. It's a thing that you'd expect we would do 50 years ago, not today, but it still happens today.
Yeah, I mean, it's a continual history repeats itself.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
and you know, if you know, I mean, that's sort of like I suppose when, as a people, as humans, are we going to stop this nonsense?
Mm.
You know, and become better people. I mean, you know, maybe we don't have the ability to do that yet. Maybe because you know, our brains aren't sophisticated enough to be able to make those changes, or to be able to sort of like become better humans. I mean, when First Nations people, when they took them away from their country and put them in missions, First Nations people, and as I've said and as we've spoken about, are very, very connected to the land, right? Spirits, the dreaming, you know, even a rock, you know, like is very important to them. It's like their church.
Yeah, and it's in a way I think that is very hard to understand and grasp, and experience. It's because most of us don't understand that. I don't understand that. You know, so it's very hard to understand the deep connection with the land.
Yeah, yeah. But you know something? There was one time, this is sort of like going back a number of years now, where I was sort of like hitchhiking around. I got to Uluru, which is sort of like the big, you know, years and years ago, it used to be called Ayers Rock, but now First Nations people own it. And so I went there, and I actually camped in a swag at the base of it, and I set up a little fire. And in the background, I could hear sort of like Aboriginal singing and dancing, and you know, didgeridoos and all that type of thing. And so I kicked the fire out, and I thought, I'm going to get in trouble here, right? I started the fire again, and then it started again. So they're obviously having, because there's sort of like men's places, special places, and there's women's special places. And these days there's signs around Uluru that say, you know, you can't go there, or you can't go here, and all that type of thing. Anyway, so I kicked the fire out again, and I just sort of like laid back in the swag, and I sort of like looked up at the stars, right? And because there's no light in Central Australia, the stars actually look like they're sort of like an inch away from your eyes. Just incredible. And just the silence, you know, just the silence, and just like laying there, and you know, miles and miles and miles away from anywhere or anyone, except for, you know, this First Nations music and didgeridoos and clapsticks and that type of thing. And one of the most spiritual moments in my life.
Yeah, that does sound beautiful. I can imagine under the stars and the music, and kind of the presence of the moment.
Yeah.
What gives you hope that the next generation will have a healthier relationship with truth, with the history, with the land, with the people?
You know what? I can't see that happening.
You can't.
No. Not the next generation. Because unless certain things happen in our, I suppose, in our psyche and in our lives that cause or generate some sort of feeling that, yeah, we need to get more connected with the land. We need to get more connected with each other. We need to be sort of like better people. We need to sort of like appreciate, you know, other cultures and other ways of life. Because what I see at the moment as a high school teacher is less reading. I see a lot of young kids spending an awful lot of time playing games on computers, on their phones. And I mean, in Australia, we've actually taken they're not allowed to have their phones on in school anymore.
Yeah, that's recently that was done, right?
Yeah, they have to put them in a pouch, and they're not allowed to open the pouch until after school. But at lunchtime, you walk around the school, and you know, I've worked in probably 3 schools over the last 10 years, and it's always the same. Lunchtime, they're sitting there on a bench. Not all of them, not everybody, but a lot of them, a good percentage of them, sitting there on a bench with two of their mates on either side of them, playing games on their computer.
Mm.
And sort of like hoping that, as they get older, that's going to change.
Yeah. With that new rule, is that changing now?
It's already. Yeah, it's already. Yeah. I mean, it used to be a real issue. As a teacher, I used to spend half my class, telling people to put their phones away and, ding, 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 or beep, 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 while you're trying to teach.
Yeah.
And then I eventually, I used to just like collect them before they walked in the class. And then, of course, there's, you've got a half an hour argument with somebody because they don't want to give you your phone and that type of thing.
Yeah.
Not an argument, but, just a refusal.
Yeah. Do you think now with the internet, obviously there's a negative aspect to it, which you just mentioned, but also it allows more stories to be shared, ones like yours.
Oh yeah, look, don't get me wrong. I mean, the internet's is a wonderful resource. I mean, I use it all the time teaching, and obviously if you're doing research for novels, I mean, this is my fourth novel now, and I mean, it's contemporary historical fiction, but prior to that, my first three novels, they were sort of like set back in sort of like the 15, 16, 1700s. So having access to scientific databases like JSTOR and that type of thing is it's crucial. It makes it so much easier to sort of like write a novel.
Yeah,
because you're sort of like I mean, you can't use Google because it's not to write a novel, especially this one I've just written. To make it authentic, you have to go right to the source, and you need to be very, very careful and be very, very respectful of what you are writing, especially when you're talking about First Nations culture. But I don't preach, and I don't say that I'm speaking for First Nations people. I'm just echoing sentiment,
which
based on those the anthropological texts that I've written.
Yeah,
that have been written.
Yeah. If you could change one public misconception about Australia's past colonial history, what would it be?
I mean, there was when back in sort of like the early 1800s, I mean, the people that lived in Australia were a tough lot, and they weren't very sort of like weren't very educated. A lot of them, as you know, sort of like came over as from the UK and Scotland Island as criminals. So like back in sort of like the 1700s and that. One thing I would change is that the UK didn't use, in the early days, Australia as a dumping ground for all the criminals and that they wanted to get out of England, and maybe step forward a little bit and make it a place of a new beginning. The ability to and have people that weren't sort of like the and then there was the odd one, that there was like a couple of lords and that came over with the First Fleet and all that type of thing, but primarily they were not the best kind of people that came over originally.
Sorry, Paul, I meant what's a misconception that people have about Australia's history that that they have that is incorrect?
Oh, right, okay. Today, or history, history, what the misconception? I think there's a lot of misconceptions about Australians. I mean, I lived in England for the first 10 years of my life. Then I lived in Canada for the second 10 years, went to high school in Canada. And I think the misconceptions that Australia is basically a bunch of rough people
I mean, when
right?
you just look at just the animals that you have, you got to be rough just to survive there. I mean, the
Yeah, yeah,
spiders and the and that. I don't know. I don't know
yeah,
if anyone, if everyone can do that stuff.
yeah. It's um, working out in the outback it was tough. You know, like you're working in 40, 42, 43 degree heat.
Yeah.
Um, you know, like you'd have a sandwich and at smoker, or when we'd have a break, you put the sandwich up to your lips to take a bite, and there'd be, and this isn't an exaggeration. There'd be sort of like 30, 40 flies on the edge of the
Wow.
sandwich,
Oh,
right?
really?
And you
Yeah.
sort of like swap them away. And
Yeah.
by the time you got the sandwich back to your mouth, it'd be back again.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
You're just fighting with the flies as you're eating.
yes,
Yeah.
and you'd sort of like snort a couple, swallow a couple every day while you're working, and
Yeah.
then if you sort of like breathe one in, a couple of days later you'd sort of like spit it out, and
Sounds. Yeah. I can't wait to go there.
but saying that, and I remember we're sitting on a so like a little mound of like track sleepers, and we're just sort of like sitting there, just having a bit of a break. All of a sudden, this brown snake. It must have been about I'd say maybe 2.5 meters long,
Oh,
and it's I mean they're deadly. They're deadly, and those brown snakes. I mean that if you sort of like approach them, they'll stop, and they'll turn around, and they'll chase you,
oh wow.
and they're so aggressive, And but that's sort of like yeah, there's snakes. There's sort of like funnel web spiders that sort of like live in your backyard, and I've had a couple sort of like walk in the when I was living up in the Blue Mountains, a couple of funnel web spiders, which is like I suppose what you'd call a tarantula, that sort of like walk in the back door, and so like if you go near them, they rise up on their back legs, and their fangs sort of sort of like poke out. But
Yeah.
you sort of like catch them in a jar, and take it to the hospital, and they send it to somewhere where they get the venom, the anti venom.
Yeah.
So, but when you're out in the outback and you
Yeah.
get bitten by a brown snake, you got
Yeah. So you're working and surviving at the same time.
yeah, sort of,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
going to the pub after that.
Yeah. Yeah. You kind of have to really if you
Yeah,
survive the day.
yeah,
Celebrate.
yeah.
That's awesome, Paul. This has been really interesting. Just lastly, before I ask you where people can find the book, what's your favorite part of the book?
Probably the ending.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I like twists and turns, and people often ask me, what's my process of writing, and there's no process. I don't plan anything. For me, writing is sort of like this movie sort of like takes place in front of my eyes, and all I do is transfer it from the movie down onto a bit of paper, or to
Mhm.
type it in a computer. And the great thing about that is that because I don't plan anything, the novel is continually evolving.
So you're surprised as you're writing. You're kind of, oh wow, this is
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. I mean, I can be up to sort of like 3/4 of the way through the book, or even a quarter. Yeah, say halfway through the book, and think, oh, I'll be walking down the street and go, oh, that'd be a good twist. So then I can, because I don't plan anything, I can go back to the beginning and sort of like start putting in the I suppose the little hints of a possible twist or a turn that might occur later on in the book.
Nice. That's
So yeah, I mean, I wrote the ending probably about three times. So that's probably my favorite part.
So when you start writing the book, you don't have an ending in mind, or the ending changes. Okay, you don't have. Yeah.
No, no,
Yeah.
I just watch the movie and type it down on the
Yeah.
computer, and sometimes I might shift bits and take bits out and think, oh, that's rubbish. I'll get rid of that and continue on this. Yeah,
An adventure. An
yeah.
adventure. Paul, this has been great. Where can people find your book or your other books, or reach out to you?
Okay, so I've got a website, paulrushworthbrown.com, and I tend to write sort of like just little historical bits and pieces in there, and my novels are available everywhere basically. Outback Odyssey was released in on the 20th of June, and it was published by Historian Press, which is an American company. And they've done a fantastic job, sort of like promoting it and that type of thing. So yeah, Historian Press, Paul Rushworth Brown, or Amazon, Paul Rushworth Brown, Outback Odyssey. It's everywhere, man.
Perfect. Well, you heard it. It's everywhere, and you need to get it. And we'll put that in the show notes. Some links to that. Paul, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much.